Hi everybody, this is Megan Arizioni, and today I'm going to be giving a presentation entitled Does History and Reputation Equate to Success? An inside look into one of Harvard Medical School's graduate departments. The primary source of my talk today was an interview with the Associate Dean and Director for Graduate Studies at the Division of Medical Sciences at Harvard Medical School. The Division of Medical Sciences, which I'll often refer to as DMS, is a group of PhD programs in biomedical research. The programs altogether have over 600 students with 600 faculty and 4,000 alumni worldwide. I currently work within the Division of Medical Sciences for the Immunology program as the program administrator. Today's talk is going to focus on how research graduate school structures and cultural norms are unique compared to other higher education institutions, and we're also going to talk about external influences that have an effect on the division, as well as whether or not the division is succeeding in providing students who are leading towards the betterment of our society. Dorman et al. Stated that typological differences between institutions are a result of historical development and institutional missions. The Division of Medical Sciences is no exception. In the early 1900s, there was a big need for biomedical research as the boom for medical advancements was really kind of exploding at that time. And Harvard decided to create a group of PhD programs located at the medical school to do just that, biomedical research. When I asked my interviewee, who I'm going to refer to as DC, what the mission statement is, he said that it was to train graduate students in biomedical research to ensure that they are an integral part of the HMS community and that they have the resources they need to research the topics that they are passionate about. When I asked how his programs are doing in general, he said that they are thriving, that some of the alumni include Nobel Peace Prize winners, they cure diseases, and the majority have moved on to have successful careers as scientists. DC believed that it's the quality of the students, faculty, and staff that make it such a success, and that although it's important to have a mission statement driving that, it's more the quality of the people that make up the institution. Although DC didn't feel that the mission statement had a major effect on their students, I did find research to contradict his theory, and that was by Lee et al., whose research found that students at institutions whose mission statements include ethical statements have significantly higher perceived character trait importance and character reinforcement than students at institutions whose mission statements do not include ethical statements. This shows that when students have kind of a higher, deeper understanding of what they are striving to achieve, it really creates a better community. As this quote by Dorman et al. Says, you really can't understand an organization until you understand the environment in which it operates. I asked what DMS's environment was like, and he said that DMS is a supportive and warm climate where you tend to feel more like part of a family than a school. DC explained that there's an unusual level of informality where there are high levels of success without rigid guidelines or policies. I find that this is a very unique environment when you're thinking of Harvard, because when you think of Harvard, you think of history and reputation and kind of a high level of standards. And although DC said that there is all of that, it tends to be in a very relaxed and different environment than the rest of the Harvard community. There are a bunch of different parts of the division. There's the Associate Dean's Office, Student Affairs, Information Technology, Finance, and then the 6 program satellite offices. Each unit has its own level of autonomy, but is also tightly coupled with each other to create a rather harmonious working environment. All of the units work together to serve the faculty and students within the division. And when asked about the decision-making process, there's 3 levels. At the initial level, it's the division. DC meets with his staff and creates a decision based on the immediate needs of the program. At the second level, this would be something more related to a curriculum or higher levels of change that require discussion with the program leadership. So the program heads of the program, the administrators, and DC would get together and a decision would be made along those lines. Within those 2 levels, the decision-making process is pretty smooth and it doesn't take a lot of time for action to happen. However, at the 3rd level of decision-making, what happens is DC and his program leadership meet, and then DC takes what they've gained from that meeting to the dean or the provost's office, depending on if it's the graduate school, or the medical school. At this level, it tends to be a very slow-moving process because it's hard to get meetings with the dean and it's hard for action to really happen quickly. So DC does try to make as many decisions as he can at the lower levels before bringing a problem to the top level of the dean or the provost. The division also operates in an open systems model and relies solely on external organizations for gaining support of the students financially. However, due to the high caliber of students and faculty, the environment is pretty stable right now, which has really helped to foster a better working environment for the students and the staff without additional stress of worrying whether or not they will get the funding they need to continue doing the work they are doing. Next, we're going to talk about faculty membership and how its rules and regulations are quite unique in the Division of Medical Sciences. And the main reason for that is that most of the faculty within the division are not teaching courses. They're actually conducting research in laboratories. So what our students do is within the first 2 years, they take courses and rotate throughout laboratories. And then they select a dissertation lab where they have an advisor who is a faculty member and kind of mentors and oversees their research throughout their PhD careers. When I asked DC about tenure, he said that the faculty members kind of strive for the very best of the best. These are faculty members looking to win Nobel Prizes and to cure diseases and to do really big things. So the tenure process usually involves a lot of publications and just time at the bench. After they have reached their tenure, there is no post-tenure review process, and DC explained that these faculty members, as I just said, they hold themselves to such a high standard that in order for them to succeed and for their labs to succeed in their research, they need to be the best teachers and the best mentors that they can be. In research by Goodman from 1990, they found that findings that suggest that creating a post-tenure review period is important and that it should focus on post-tenure development, not a whole retenuring process. I brought this up to DC and he simply stated that he does agree that in, say for example, undergraduate institutions, this would be very useful. However, due to the caliber of scientists at the medical school, it's not necessary. We're also going to talk about how Dorman et al. Described that there is an inherent natural tension between faculty and administration due to the incompatibility of professionalism and formalization. In the DMS model, though, it actually contradicts this theory because there tends to be little to no tension between faculty and administration. And I think the reason for that is they don't have the formalization that most administrations require. I definitely do think this is an exception to the rule due to the high quality of students, faculty, and administration that's associated with this Harvard program. However, I think in the majority of institutions, this theory would be, useful to think about. Next, we're going to talk about external controls that have a hold over the Division of Medical Sciences and how this both helps and hinders innovative research. Since the Higher Education Act of 1965, the government has increasingly become more involved in the access, accountability, research, and international engagements of colleges and universities. In terms of funding, 80% of students receive some form of financial aid, and 63% of that comes from the federal government. In the Division of Medical Sciences, 100% of the funds for training grants for students comes from the federal government. Therefore, the division must adhere to all of the federal protections, requirements, and expectations that the government requires of them to get these grants. Unfortunately, when I talk to DC, the biggest issue with this is that policymakers are not typically scientists, and they don't know the logistics of how specific departments operate. According to Natal, from 2015, there is a large variety of policymakers who participate in higher education rulemaking. And unfortunately, this can go against the best interest of the students. For example, DC explained to me that NSF fellowships created a new rule where students were unable to teach and be compensated for teaching while on an NSF fellowship. Unfortunately, the majority of DMS students teach during their second and third years in the program to polish their teaching skills and determine whether or not academia is the right career path for them. So this rule obviously posed a big threat to the division, and DC had to go and kind of fight it. And it was rather contradictory since NSF fellowships are supposed to be geared towards students in academia, and in general more research funding is given to academia than non-academia. They did eventually abolish this rule. However, it cost a lot of resource and time away from the students that they should have been focusing on their studies and teaching. Another issue DMS faces, since all their training grant funding comes from the federal government, is that there's just simply not enough. So there's a high competition rate for these training grants. And you have to think about it, DMS with their level of faculty and students have to work very hard to get these grants. So if you could imagine how hard it is at this level, what it's like for smaller research institutions could be very detrimental to their success. In an article by Esters et al., the authors stressed the need for institutions to work with more foundations to investigate non-traditional funding sources to solve this particular issue. The biggest thing with that, when I proposed this idea to DC, was that there's simply not enough staff. And what happens is faculty members start to have dual roles as faculty members and development advocates. And what this can do is this could affect the quality of mentoring and teaching that the faculty are providing and cause internal conflicts within certain labs if they're receiving more funding than others. DC said that the best way to do this sort of thing would be to have a development office at the departmental level which oversaw this kind of non-traditional funding sources so that they were evenly distributed throughout the programs. As I touched upon earlier, accountability also requires a lot more staff. So these training grants require every year more and more time and effort in order to get these training grants approved. In the division alone, in the last 5 years, the training grant staff has grown from 1 person to 6 people. In addition to training grant restrictions, a large majority of faculty time is spent on human and animal subject regulation, reporting, and monitoring. The Foundation for Research Protection requires that 3 fundamental ethical principles are followed when conducting research on animals or humans. That there's a respect for the people involved, and they protect their autonomy, are given informed consent. Also, that they maximize the benefits while also minimizing any potential harms. And there is justice by evenly distributing benefits and costs throughout their research subjects. DC said that this is obviously a necessary headache. It's really important that animal and human research is strictly monitored and that it is for the betterment of everyone involved that the government continues to see to this. Other external influences that have an effect over DMS besides the federal government, one of them is the alumni. DC explained that the alumni play a huge controlling factor in the program in terms of mentoring and setting precedents on expectations. So some of the alumni have started leading biotech companies all around the world, in addition to nonprofit companies and consulting agencies that assist the federal government in their policymaking. Another issue along those lines is policymakers' perceptions of higher education is heavily influenced by the media. Therefore, DMS is indirectly affected by the media. For example, when there was a big Ebola crisis last year, the division's program actually went and started shifting their research to figure out a cure and a way to vaccinate people from getting this so that there wasn't a epidemic. The idea that institutions of higher learning should exist for the betterment of society and the promotion of democratic ideas is as old as the founding of this nation. Harvard was the first college in the United States and therefore has set an example for all institutions that have followed after that. And because of this, they should be held to the highest standards. DC explained that there's a snowball scheme in place where Harvard is thought of as a preeminent place and attracts the highest levels of resources and endowments, which then brings in the best people to work and attend the school, which then cycles back to the amount of resources and endowments available. So because they have all of these resources and opportunities available to them, they should be doing their part to make sure that they are bettering society as much as possible. An example of this snowball scheme would be how in recent media attention, the NFL is getting a lot of criticism about concussions. So the NFL actually has partnered with Harvard and has given millions and millions of dollars to start a program that is conducting research on head injuries associated with sporting events. Since they're in the position to have the biggest impacts on our society, and DMS students do this every day, words like cancer and AIDS, which used to be simultaneously associated with death, are no longer as scary, and that's in large part due to the research being conducted at Harvard. Dorman et al. Explained that the majority of advancements in knowledge have been when the focus was on solving a societal crisis. For example, in Dr. George Church's lab, he's working to solve the energy and pollution crisis and actually has created new organisms that create fuel and soaks up toxic waste. DC told me that Harvard in general and specifically the Division of Medical Sciences engages the local community through many democratic partnerships. Harvard Medical School has an entire department dedicated to community affairs which provides services to the local community. For example, there's the medical family van at the medical school that actually is run by residents and students and provides free medical care to the local neighborhoods, which are low SES neighborhoods. Also, there's partnerships with multiple local schools, which we'll get to in a minute, as well as a list of preferred vendors, which helps to stimulate local businesses. Research by Davidson et al. Found that service learning partnerships are a mutually beneficial opportunity to bridge relationships within communities, to bring to life theoretical concepts and foster foundations necessary for educating future leaders of our society. Both the medical school and graduate school participate in a large amount of service learning efforts. In the division alone, there's 2 programs in place, the HPrep course and the Native American Student Program. For the H-Prep course, local high schoolers are taught every Saturday by the Division of Medical Science students on preparation for college placement. In the Native American program, it's a 6-week-long program in the summer where the division flies in Native American students from all across the country and provides them with course learning in the sciences and really helps to empower these students. And it also helps our graduate students practice teaching skills and get them out of the lab and create a positive influence on the youth. A strong democracy has an educated and informed citizenry, inclusive social and political systems, and a vigorous participation of students in community life and public policy making. I feel that in general, DMS has all of these different components after speaking with DC. He said that in general, the students get involved in civic duties and democratic processes, and the faculty tend to be naturally democratic. However, these are programs in biomedical research, and although politics play their part in every concentration, it isn't a primary focus. DC did say that there was an interesting disparity between the medical school and Harvard University, where there's a clear voting rule distinction between the two schools. Harvard Medical School doesn't tend to model democracy in their governing practice, whereas Harvard University does. Any institution with the resources and reputation comparable to Harvard should have a mission driven by ideals for improving our society, creating civic leaders, and promoting democratic principles. And I think in general, the division does a great job of doing all of this. In conclusion, I feel that the Division of Medical Sciences and Harvard in general are succeeding in living up to their reputations as successful leaders in higher education. Through my research and talks with DC, I found that the degree of success graduate research institutions are capable of is really dependent on the amount of external funds and resources available to them. Harvard is successful because of the people that make up the institutions within it, and the reason such bright and talented people choose Harvard is for their resources. In return, Harvard does an excellent job of giving back to the community through democratic partnerships and community engagements, as well as, more importantly, conducting research that has a significant effect on our biomedical technologies available to us. I thank you for your time. On the following slides, you will find a complete list of my references.